Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a thriller fantasy movie called Perfume, the story of a murderer. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens in a fish market in Paris, where a heavily pregnant vendor gives birth to a baby boy. All her previous babies were stillbirths, so she assumes this one is dead too. She thus pushes the baby into a pile of leftover fish before going back to work. She could have maybe checked his pulse or given him a spank before making off like Smeagol like that, but I guess it was a different time. However, as soon as the baby smells the horrid scents from the market, he cries out loud. All the people in the market hear him and immediately accuse the woman of trying to kill her baby. She tries to run away, but is promptly caught and executed. Afterwards, the baby is sent to an orphanage run by a woman named Madame Gaillard. Years pass, and now the baby has grown into a 5-year-old named Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. He has a unique talent, a superior olfactory sense that allows him to identify any scent. Jean can pinpoint animals, fruits, objects, simply by their smell, even if they are far away. When he turns 13, Madame Gaillard sells Jean to a tannery for 5 quid. The old lady is happy that she made good money, but this happiness doesn't last very long. A couple of thieves murder Madame Gaillard on her way back home. On the other hand, Jean becomes an apprentice of a big, hideous man named Grenouille. Life is tough at the tannery, as the laborers have to work 12 hours a day, but Jean proves to be resilient and keeps working with all his determination. After several years of grinding, Grenouille finally promotes Jean to an errand boy. He takes the young lad to the city and goes from shop to make deliveries. As Jean walks through the crowded streets, he lets his nose absorb all the new scents. He is fascinated by the plethora of smells, both good and bad. Shortly afterwards, Grenouille has to attend a meeting at one of the shops, leaving Jean all alone. The young man takes this opportunity and lets his nose guide him to a nearby perfume shop. It is full of customers who are there to buy a new trendy scent called Amour un Psych. However, Jean is soon distracted by the sweetest scent he's ever smelled. He instantly becomes fascinated and runs after the source of the smell. Jean discovers that it comes from a beautiful red-haired woman selling plums. He tracks her scent and eventually finds her in an alley sitting at a table. Jean sneaks behind the woman and begins to take in the waft of her smell. This is when she turns around and suddenly comes face to face with him. Frightened, the woman is about to scream, but Jean covers her mouth just in time. He hears someone coming towards the spot and drags her into the shadows. A couple soon walks by, and Jean waits for them to be gone. He then finally lets go of the woman, only to discover that he's accidentally suffocated her to death. In a roundabout way, the fault lies with Grenouille. Instead of being horrified at what he just did, though, Jean starts smelling her body from head to toe like a greedy animal. But as minutes pass, the corpse begins to lose its living scent, pushing the young man into a mental agony. That night at the tannery, Grenouille beats the hell out of Jean for running off, but the latter couldn't care less as he keeps thinking about the woman's scent. He decides that his goal in life is to find a way to preserve someone's scent forever. Somewhere else in Paris, the once celebrated perfumer Giuseppe Baldini laments the lack of clients. Ever since his rival made Amour un Psych, nobody comes to his shop anymore. Giuseppe desperately tries to figure out the formula of Amour un Psych in an attempt to revive his business, but no matter how much he smells it, he can't pinpoint all of the ingredients. As fate would have it, Jean arrives at Giuseppe's workshop one night, bringing a shipment of animal hide from the tannery. He is instantly amazed by all the ingredients and smells. In fact, he can tell that Giuseppe has been experimenting with Amour un Psych. Jean informs the perfumer what ingredients he's missing, and even volunteers to make it on the spot. Giuseppe is clearly skeptical about his claim, but gives him permission anyway. The young man then begins mixing several ingredients, ignoring all the traditional techniques. When he's done, Giuseppe is shocked to discover that this inexperienced boy from the tannery has perfectly recreated Amour un Psych. like in one go.
Oh ho ho! You are a genius of a smell.
The very next day, Giuseppe buys John from Grima, who happily accepts the large sum of money. The big, hideous man heads straight to a tavern and gets drunk out of his mind. Meanwhile, Jean starts working as Giuseppe's apprentice, learning all about this new trade. He creates a variety of wonderful perfumes that pushes Giuseppe's shop to fame once again. The seasoned master then teaches Jean that every good perfume is made of 12 notes, but a truly enchanting one has a 13th essence that dominates all other notes. The next day, Giuseppe teaches Jean how to extract the essence of roses by boiling and condensing them at the right temperature. The young man is so impressed by this whole process that he starts experimenting on his own. He grabs random things from the street like iron chains, a horseshoe, and even his master's pet cat. He then puts them inside the perfume device, hoping to get their scents. Early the next morning, Giuseppe wakes up to loud noises coming from the workshop. He rushes there only to discover Jean having a breakdown. The boy accuses him of lying because his system can't extract the smell of things like metals. Giuseppe can't believe that his apprentice has been trying to get the scent of such things, which aren't supposed to smell. When Giuseppe checks inside the machine, he's horrified to discover Jean has put his cat in it too. He yells at the young man, telling him he can't distill the scent of a living being, but this revelation comes as a shock to Jean, and he suddenly passes out right there. In the next few days, Jean gets so sick that he has to be bedridden. Giuseppe tries his best to cure him, but to no avail. On his deathbed, Jean asks his master if there's any other method to extract a scent other than distillation. Giuseppe tells him about enfleurage, a technique only used in the city of Grasse. This information immediately revives Jean, and in a short few days he becomes healthy again. He now wants to travel to Grasse and learn about the new technique. The only problem is that Jean will need the proper paperwork to get an apprenticeship in that city. Thankfully, Giuseppe agrees to make these papers in exchange for 100 new perfume formulas. Jean couldn't care less and recites hundreds of new potions from memory. He then grabs his papers and heads on his way out of Paris. Later, we see Giuseppe going to bed, clutching his new formulas. He is extremely happy, but fate takes a dark twist. Giuseppe's house suddenly crumbles down and kills him, along with his entire family. On his way to Grasse, Jean finally gets to explore the countryside, which greatly improves his mood. He decides to take the longer route, walking through the mountains to keep breathing clearly. Jean eventually climbs to the top of a hill and shelters up inside a cave. Here, for the first time in his life, he can only smell one thing: the scent of stone. Jean ends up staying there for several years and would have stayed longer, but the dreams about the plum woman keep haunting him every night. When Jean finally comes out, he washes his body in the rain and makes a life-altering realization. Jean doesn't have a scent at all, which basically makes him feel like a nobody. At this moment, he swears that he will prove to the world that he's an exceptional human being. Following this, Jean gets back on the road and keeps walking for days. He is about to reach Grasse when he suddenly catches an amazing scent, even better than the plum woman's. A carriage soon passes by and he discovers the scent belongs to a beautiful woman named Laura. Excited, Jean runs all the way to Grasse and follows his nose until he makes it to her mansion. He sneaks inside the garden and watches Laura from afar, desperately trying to get as close as he can. However, his romantic time is cut short when Laura's father, Antoine Richy, sends her back inside. The next day, Jean starts working in a perfume shop where he learns the art of enfleurage. He is under the supervision of Madame Amulfi and her lover, Dominique Drouot. The process consists of pressing flowers into animal fat and boiling them in a large container to extract their essence. One evening, Jean decides to hire a prostitute, but instead of having fun with her, he forcefully whacks her head with a wooden handle. Once she is dead, he cuts off her hair, covers her entire body in animal fat, and then wraps it with a piece of cloth. A few hours later, Jean scrapes off the fat and puts it through a complicated process that finally extracts her human scent. Pleased with himself, Jean puts this scent in the first bottle out of 13, planning to find all the right notes for the perfect perfume. As months pass by, Jean starts to pick out women, usually young and beautiful ones, who also smell amazing. He kills them and repeats his fat and wrap process to extract their scents. One by one, he manages to finish 12 such unique but dark and twisted scents to his collection. Jean mixes all of these potions together and creates one powerful concoction. It is so potent that when Drouot accidentally smells it, he changes changes from an aggressive to a very docile person. Jean is excited by his progress, but he still needs the 13th note. He has chosen the perfect victim for it, the beautiful, almost ethereal Lady Laura. However, her father Antoine Richie also knows that something really dark is happening in Grasse. He doesn't want his daughter to be the next victim of the mysterious serial killer. So, one morning, Richie packs their things and heads out of the town along with his daughter. He hopes to trick the killer by sending out an empty carriage in the opposite direction. All the while, he and Laura travel by horse towards a secluded monastery. Unfortunately for him, Jean's nose immediately detects that Laura's scent is getting weaker. He also packs his things and begins tracking her smell to find their exact whereabouts. Back in Grasse, a street dog accidentally ends up pulling out a piece of hair from Jean's living quarters. This is noticed by Drouot, who keeps on digging and soon finds all the dead women's clothes and hair. Sometime later, Richie and Laura arrive at a remote inn and rent all the rooms. Richie chooses a room with no windows and locks his daughter up for the night, but this doesn't stop Jean from tracking her scent, and he eventually sneaks in through the servant's room. He then steals the key from there and finally reaches Laura. The next morning, Richie checks on his daughter and is horrified to discover that she is dead. Meanwhile, Jean is in the nearby forest, where he quickly finishes extracting Laura's essence. He adds it to the other 12 to finally create his ultimate, enchanting perfume. An excited Jean then proceeds to sniff it, but he's suddenly surrounded by policemen. They have found all the evidence to indict him with the murder of several women. Jean is then promptly arrested, but he manages to hide the perfume in his pocket. A few weeks later, Jean is to be presented in a public ceremony in front of the citizens of Grasse. A council lord and a bunch of guards show up to drag him out of his cell, but just as they approach, he opens the perfume bottle with a malicious plan in mind. The scene abruptly shifts to moments later, and we see Jean arriving at the public ceremony in an expensive velvet dress. He has also put a few drops of his enchanting perfume on his neck. As soon as the people nearby smell him, they fall to their knees, amazed by his mere presence. Jean walks to the stage where he was supposed to be publicly flogged, but his scent is so intoxicating that the executioner immediately declares him innocent.
Did he kill all those people? Yes. But does he smell good? Yes.
Next, Jean puts some perfume on a handkerchief and starts waving it around to let the scent spread. The whole crowd falls into a state of absolute euphoria, so much so that the bishop announces that Jean is actually an angel. The only one who hasn't fallen for it is Richie, who is on a balcony that the perfume hasn't yet reached. Following this, Jean lets his handkerchief fly with the wind, and it soon lands in the middle of the crowd. It causes everyone to lose their minds, and all the people start engaging in a huge orgy. Jean too imagines himself with the plum woman and realizes he hasn't ever known real love. At this moment, Richie gets on a scaffold, ready to finish the execution by himself, but he's also overtaken by the power of the perfume and falls to his knees, calling Jean his son. A few hours later, the townspeople wake up and are overwhelmed with shame. Jean is nowhere to be seen, and Drouot is arrested in his place, since their clothes and hair were found in his shop. He is tortured for 14 hours and eventually forced to confess to the crime he never committed. Meanwhile, Jean returns to the smelly, ugly fish market of Paris where he was born. He has been overtaken by grief and knows his entire existence has been without love. Jean thus stops in the middle of the street and empties the whole perfume bottle on his head. The scent is so powerful that it causes the locals to rush to him. They pile up on top of his body and devour him, maddened by the power of the scent. The next morning, the only thing left of Jean are his clothes and a drop of perfume. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.